Hi Pre-Calc, this is video number 2 now, 4.4 lecture. We just talked about how to calculate in general, calculate the reference angle. Again, the reference angle is the theta prime that falls in between the terminal side of the original angle with the horizontal axis. It's an acute angle. So that's what we just talked about in video number 1 for this lecture. And now in video number 2, I'm going to do some examples with you. As a reminder, this is using reference angles is how you find the output to trig without using a calculator. So this allows us to do certain standard angles by hand. We're going to start with finding the sine, cosine, and tangent of 300 degrees. I am going to ask you to do a problem like this on test 3, so I will give you 2 examples here of how to solve this, and then I'll let you try the homework and you can see how it goes. When you start this, the first thing you want to do is figure out what quadrant the angle falls in. So 300 degrees, if I drew that angle, that would fall in quadrant 4. 300 degrees would fall in quadrant 4. So now that I know what my original angle is, I can calculate my reference angle. So that's what we're going to do next. If you think you know how to do that, go ahead and stop the video, find the reference angle, and then check that we're both on the same page. Okay, hopefully you did that. Hopefully you figured out what it is. You stopped the video. I'm going to continue now. So the reference angle always goes from the terminal side of the original to the x-axis. So the x-axis is up here. So the terminal side to the x-axis, which means that this guy in here is theta prime. Now I'm going to calculate theta prime. So we talked about, if you're in quadrant 4, how you calculate theta prime. And if you recall, it's going to be 1 full revolution minus the original angle. So if you have 1 full revolution, but you take away all of this, that leaves you with this. So my theta here is 300. Oh, I'm in degrees, so let's stay in degrees. So the formula we actually want to use is 360 degrees minus theta, because we're in degrees. If you're in radians, stay in radians. If you're degrees, stay in degrees. All right, so let me try that again. So it's going to be 360 minus 300. So our theta prime is going to be 60 degrees. Great, I hope you understood how we did that. So this guy right here is 60 degrees. Okay, now we're getting really close to the final answer, so let me just sort of set you up for the big aha moment. The initial question is, what is sine of 300 degrees, cosine of 300 degrees, tangent of 300 degrees? Without a calculator, that's the original question. So how you answer that is you get the correct, there's 2 things you have to do. You have to get the correct plus or minus, and I'll show you what I mean by that, and the reference angle, and that will give you the answer. So now let's talk about the correct plus or minus. If we're in quadrant 4, you have to know whether the sine is positive or negative, whether the cosine is positive or negative, and whether the tangent is positive or negative. And that goes back to that mnemonic all students take calculus. And apparently for me, all students take calculus online right now. But in quadrant 4, that means that only the cosine is positive, right? So that means that in quadrant 4, the sine of theta has a negative output, the cosine of theta has a positive output, and the tangent of theta has a negative output, right? I gave you, before we went away for the spring break, what the plus or minuses were for each quadrant. Okay, so that means that the reference angle is a sine change and the reference angle. So the sine is going to be negative, the cosine is going to be positive, the tangent is going to be negative. So it's this and the reference angle together. I'm going to say it one more time because some people need to see it to sort of register what I'm saying. So let me try one more time. The original angle is equivalent to the reference angle and the corresponding sine change of the quadrant. The reference angle and the corresponding sine of whatever quadrant you're in. So now you're going to notice that these are the angles we had to memorize. You have to know what 60 degrees is of all the 6 trig functions. So that means you had to know this triangle. This triangle right here is your 60, 30, 90. And that was, you had to memorize that. So across from 60 is always radical 3. Across from 30 is always 1. And the hypotenuse for this triangle is always 2. Remember, I asked you to memorize 2 triangles, the 45, 45, 90, the 30, 60, 90, and the unit circle. From those 3 tools, you will be able to answer all these questions. So if you have 60 degrees, you need to use a triangle with 60 degrees. So now I'm going to use this triangle to answer the question. Sine of 60 is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So I can find that just by looking at this. It's radical 3 over 2. The cosine of 60 degrees is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So that is 1/2. The tangent of 60 degrees is the opposite over the adjacent. So it's radical 3 over 1 or negative radical 3. And that is it, my friends. That is the answer without using a calculator. So, step 1, find the reference angle. Step 2, figure out what the plus and minuses are for each of the trig functions. Step 3, evaluate the sides of the memorized triangle or unit circle to find the exact values of the trig function. All right, hope that helps. I will give another example in the next video. Catch you soon. Bye-bye.